I like Mark Andrews. I know he finishes like the number 3 or 2 tight end in the league, but it's so hard to replicate that. And especially Greg Roman's offense, I don't think is going to be as potent this year as it was last year. Nor do I think Lamar Jackson is going to have as good of a season as he did the year prior. But I think he's a solid tight end. I think he gets probably 6 or 7 touchdowns, probably a little more yardage, maybe 900 yards. But good, solid tight end. You definitely want him on your team because Lamar likes his tight ends. As we saw last year, he utilized 3 of them. So with the departure of Hayden Hurst, you have to like Mark Andrews a little bit better, that now he's pretty much the guy at tight end.
And the departure of Max Williams, I think. I don't think I'm speaking.
That was 2 years ago.
2 years ago, but yeah, okay. So now it's down to 1. I also have Mark Andrews here, and I think a lot of people are going to reach for him because of how well he finished and because the potential of the Ravens offense. But if you have any concerns about the Ravens regressing, that knocks him down. And then also the thing about Mark Andrews is that almost week in and week out, he was up and down. And again, I hate to harp on like the consistency that you want out of the tight end. But that's a concern if you're also concerned additionally to the Ravens offense taking a step back. So he could be higher, and he might be higher on Teddy's list. But that's what kind of knocked him down for me.
Let me talk about Mark Andrews. I do have him higher on my list. As you well know, he is a solid pick for me and also a solid keeper candidate. But Matt, I am so glad that you harped on consistency because my friend, and you may remember him as the guy that weirdly crashed our draft just to watch it, Brian D'Amato, put together a bunch of really interesting Tableau pages for fantasy football stats that have like cooler metrics than your typical stuff. One of the metrics he sent over last week was consistency by position. And it's very interesting to see how these players kind of fall. And Matt, so far you've pretty much hit the nail on the head. Mark Andrews has a much higher standard deviation week to week. As an owner, I know that a lot of that has to do with he just had incredible games. So to me, he's the sort of player I don't even look at him as like a floor tight end. I look at him as like an opportunity player that I want to roster because he could have 25 points. And if you get your tight end plays Thursday night and he gets like 28 points, you're like,
oh yeah,
it's a victory.
Done.
It's a victory.
And he's got the power to do that. So I think a lot of that variability has to do with these super high games. I don't think his floor was very low. I mean, he was the number 4 tight end overall. But to throw out some of these more like the consistent players, surprisingly, Kittle and Kelsey are both very much like solid overall week to week. So maybe that's not so surprising because they are pretty much they're like not gadget players. They're like function players. They operate in the offense in a certain role that will get them, that 15, 20 points a game. They're very much integrated in the game plan. But a few other names that are in low consistency, which is low standard deviation, which means very consistent. Just to throw them out there: Will Dissly, Tyler Higbee, Jared Cook, Zach Ertz, Austin Hooper, and then Dallas Goedert is like right on the line. So those are like your like higher performing, and I have it clipped off at about like 25 tight ends. But those are all the guys that are sort of like, worth drafting potentially that are going to bring you that week to week consistency.
Mark Andrews, one more point on him, because Teddy made such a stink about talking about him, was that in 4 of his final 8 games, and I tend to like place a lot of importance on those final 8 games because I think it's a good indication of what the next year is going to look like. In 4 of those final 8 games, he was targeted only 4 times or less. So I guess that ties into that deviation or whatever the fuck you were talking about, Teddy. So if we reward tight ends for the volume that they occupy in an offense, then for me at least, I knock them down a few pegs if they don't have that volume.